Okay, so we're going to call to order the February 11th, 2014 Planning Commission meeting. We can have a roll call, please.
Chair Simpson.
Here.
Vice Chair Copper.
Here.
Commissioner Griffin.
Here.
Commissioner Clifford.
Here.
Commissioner Carey.
Here.
And Commissioners Walker and Cook are absent.
Thank you very much. For the agenda review, we have an item to add to the consent agenda, I believe, and that would be the minutes of January 14, 2014. These were emailed to us this afternoon, and so if it wish of the commission, we will take a 15-minute recess to give everybody a chance to read them. Is that an approved agenda change?
So we did provide revised agendas out at the 5 locations, and the reason that we would like you to go through and review these minutes tonight and approve them is because there has been a notice of intent to appeal filed with the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on the Pacific Family Dental, this is the night that you considered the appeal, and so we would like to just have the approved minutes for that record as opposed to having not approved minutes for that record.
So, do we need to do it under our regular consent agenda, or can we add it to the end of?
Chair Simpson, it doesn't matter. You can do it either way, and frankly, we can submit the final, the preliminary or draft minutes with the record, and then do a supplemental record submission later with the final ones. But I agree with Mr. Kilby. If it's easy enough to save a step, let's do it now. And you can add them to the consent agenda or do it as a separate agenda item at the end of the agenda.
So, what is the pleasure of the commission to hold it till the end, or take a 15-minute recess now?
Let's just get it done real quick.
Okay, so we will be taking
I've read it, but
under the agenda review, we will add a consent agenda item B, and that will be the January 14th commission minutes. And then we're going to take a...
no,
not for the consent agenda.
not to add it or anything. We don't have to.
Okay, good.
A general nodding of the heads. Okay, I got at least a couple people nodding. So we will take a 15-minute recess, and everybody have an opportunity to read the minutes of January 14th. Thank you. We will reconvene the Planning Commission meeting and review the consent agenda. There are 2 sets of minutes, the December 18th and the January 14th. Are there any corrections or additions to the December 18th meeting? I have 2 corrections on the January 14th meeting minutes. On page 13, the 3rd paragraph where it says, the first sentence says, we have a final staff report. I believe after speaking with Kirsten, it should be Chair Simpson asked for a final staff report. And then the last paragraph, the intent that I was trying to say, and it's the second to the last sentence, the commission chose to review the parts of the site that would be impacted on the same page, on the bottom of page 13. Mm-hmm. That application, we looked at, there was an application, but we reviewed that part of the site that was going to be impacted. So if we could make those 2. And then I have a couple of just minor Scrivener errors, and I circled them, and then I will leave them here for just spelling errors.
Also on page 15, instead of Exhibit 5, it should be Exhibit 6, as we already had an Exhibit 5.
Page
on page 15.
At the top.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yes. Okay.
I found one Scrivener error. I'll just give her that as well afterwards.
Okay. Are there any other changes to the minutes as they've been submitted? All right, then do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda as changed?
I move that we accept the consent agenda with the changes as stated.
I second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Passes. Council liaison, Mayor Middleton.
I'm going to defer mine to the planning manager on the zone change and text amendment that we passed at the last council meeting because there was some fine tuning done to it, I believe.
Okay.
And I think it passed at 9:28 and we ended at 9:30. It was long. So he'll give you all the updates.
All right. Then we will go to staff
Yeah,
announcements.
I got a lot of grief on that from a couple of counselors, so the packet was apparently like this big.
Well, that's not
I'm like,
our
welcome
fault.
to our world. Yeah,
We
okay.
aim to please and plan.
What happened, Brad? Give us all the exciting news.
It is rather exciting. So the Planning Commission recommendation, as you remember, was to approve the rezone, but to prohibit apartments or multifamily, and then to deny the text amendment unless there was some sort of sunset clause associated with it. And the City Council approved the rezone with no limitation on uses, and approved the text amendments only in the high-density residential zone with a one-year sunset clause. So it was primarily targeted towards that property. There might be some other properties that could come in within that one-year time frame that would be subject to those same limitations. And I think that something to note is when we look at a rezone, we as a planning commission need to probably think about not conditioning them as much as we can. When you condition a rezone, for example, we have to put another note on the zoning map for like the mobile home park when it got rezoned. The gentleman didn't want to go through his transportation planning rule analysis, so somehow it got conditioned. So to this date, we still struggle with having to implement that one separate from any other retail commercial zone in the city. So when we have a pre-application conference with somebody on that piece of property, there's an added level of scrutiny that goes along with it. And maybe that was your intention, and that's all well and good, but I think that to the extent that we can, it would probably be better to just deny the zone change as opposed to try and condition it. And
So you're saying if a huge apartment building gets built on that property, it's not the fault of the planning commission. That's what you're saying, right? It's the city council who voted to
collectively
remove that condition, not the planning commission. Can they hear me on the public record?
Yes.
Collectively, it's a community decision. I mean,
I get it.
You spoke for the community and the voice that you believe that they would have conveyed, and the council, further refine that.
So the council is saying that their issue was with the fact that that we passed it with the condition, and
I don't believe that they had necessarily an issue with it. I think that ultimately the consensus was that they didn't believe it was necessary to have that limitation. If you were going to rezone it high-density residential, then you were going to live with whatever would be constructed in high-density
well, it
residential
might have changed
zone.
our vote a little bit then, huh? Okay.
Well, now you know,
We'll-
moving forward.
yeah.
I mean, that's
Now we know better.
Yes, we will.
well,
Okay.
it's not knowing better. It's just you understand where they would be coming from.
All right.
All right.
And just a couple other announcements then on the 12th, which is tomorrow. There will be a Citizens Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committee for the TSP update. The Citizens Advisory Committee, you're all welcome to attend, and for that matter, you could attend the Technical Advisory Committee as well. And then on the 13th is the public open house for what is presented tomorrow at the Citizens Advisory Committee, and that will be held upstairs in the mezzanine, just right up the stairs here, because all the rooms are taken by the Charter Committee, and then the police department has something going on in their room already. So
The Citizen Advisory Committee meeting is from 6 to 8 tomorrow night at the police station, correct? And then the open house for the public to get their first view of the projects and recommendations will be here, but upstairs.
Correct.
In this building, but upstairs.
What
And what
time?
time is it tomorrow?
tomorrow
Is
is from 6 to 8.
And the one on Thursday?
The one on Thursday, I do not have the time. I believe that it is 6 as well.
Okay, that's
I
the
will,
open
I will
house.
verify and make sure
Okay.
that you guys all get emailed on that.
Okay.
And that concludes my announcements.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. we are up to community comments. Community comments are limited to those items that are not already on the agenda. I do not have any blue cards for anybody. If anybody would like to speak. All right, then we have no community comments. Now we move to new business, which is a public hearing. And I will read this script right now. The Planning Commission will hold a public hearing on PA 1305 front yard setbacks. The purpose of this hearing is to provide the public with an opportunity to testify and provide information to the Planning Commission concerning the PA 1305 front yard setbacks. The Commission will conduct tonight's hearing in the following order. Staff will present the staff report, followed by questions, if any, by the Planning Commission for staff. We will then open the hearing for public testimony, and each person's time will be limited as follows. Applicant will have 30 minutes split between presentation and rebuttal. Persons in favor of the application will have 4 minutes each. Persons opposed to the application will have 4 minutes each. And then rebuttal from the applicant will be the remainder of the 30 minutes. We will then close the public hearing. We'll have final comments by the staff of 15 minutes. Questions of staff, if any, by the Commission. Discussion and deliberation by the Commission. If you wish to speak, please fill out one of the blue testimony forms and submit it to the recording secretary. The Planning Commission chair will recognize people who wish to speak, and any questions should be addressed through the chair. When you come to the microphone, please state your name and address for the record, as this hearing will be recorded. You need to please speak clearly into the microphone. In this hearing, we are only making a recommendation to the City Council, and the City Council will be making the final decision on the matter. All right. So for this one, my script runs a little dry at this point, but are there any conflicts, potential conflicts, or bias? Because this is legislative, we do not have ex parte contact, correct? No?
Or bias. If
We
you
don't have bias?
love setbacks with all of your heart, feel free to declare that.
I can declare that. So the,
Yeah.
so the potential or actual
Yeah, it's
conflict.
actually just the conflicts of interest that come up with
conflict
the
of interest.
legislative, that's right.
All right, so does anybody have any potential conflict of interest? No. At the widest expanse of potential conflict, I'm going to disclose that our company supplies material that is ultimately sold to D.R. Horton. Now, we have multiple customers, and as was told to me, lots of people supply to D.R. Horton, so I am not in an exclusive class, but it just, I am putting it out there, and I have no control of which of our customers buy from us, so it probably has actual very limited potential conflict. So based on that, we were ready for the staff report.
Thank you. Just one quick thing I wanted to say at the staff report. The Exhibit 2, which is the proposed development code changes, clean format. You did not get the clean format. You got the existing code. So the track changes format would be the code that would be amended as proposed, and I'll get to that as proposed in a moment. I read it. So this is PA 1305, and it was a proposal by D.R. Horton to amend the front yard setbacks within 3 of our zones, and they're the medium density residential, low, medium density residential, high, and the high density residential zones. Currently, in all of our residential zones, we have a minimum front yard setback of 20 feet. There are exceptions, and primarily those are in planned unit developments. So we have some setbacks that are 15 feet, and we have some that are 10 feet in our community. Oh, wrong way. This is just a graphic showing what our existing setbacks are. They're not proposing to amend the side or rear setbacks. And then the proposal would take the primary structure to 14 feet, so that's the main face of the house. The face of the garage to 20 feet, which is customarily implemented when you do variable setbacks because you want to have room in front of your garage to have a car park on the driveway. And then they want to allow 10 feet to the front of the porch. the considerations that I wanted you to think about as you're moving forward, because this really is a community decision. It's a policy decision that will ultimately be made by the city council, but they'll need direction from what your thoughts are in your recommendation. Setbacks were originally put in to American zoning standards because the idea is that we have light and air moving through a development. And as development goes, we got bigger lots, and in our suburban development, we typically have larger setbacks, and then in our more urban developments, we have smaller setbacks. We haven't, within the city of Sherwood, on all new plats, all new subdivisions, we always require a minimum 8-foot public utility easement around the perimeter of the lot. So we want to make sure that we're not allowing buildings to encroach within that public utility easement. And so what they've asked for would not encroach in that public utility easement. And the last thing I want to talk about is that we have a provision in our code, 1652.050, which allows architectural features to project into front and rear yard setbacks for up to 5 feet. So any decision you make tonight, we want to make a consideration for that. So for example, if they have the face of the house at 14 feet and they put in an eave that's 5 feet, I don't know why they would, or a bay window that projects out 5 feet into that setback, then you're actually pushing your setback down to 9 feet under that provision. So you'll want to consider that as you deliberate. I was asked by several of you to look at other surrounding jurisdictions, and I'm going to look at this so I can give you some semblance of what I discovered. So within the city of Tualatin, they allow a front yard setback, and I just broke it down because their zoning standards are different than ours. They don't have medium density residential low or medium density residential high. So what I looked at was low density, medium density, and high density. What we're dealing with here from the applicant is our medium density, which is the equivalent of their medium densities and the high density. But I just threw the low density in there so that you understood what their perspective was. So within Tualatin, they have a front yard setback of 15 feet within their low density. And then within their medium and high density, it's a stepped front yard setback, and it depends on the actual height of the structure. Within the city of Lake Oswego, within the medium density, they have a 20-foot setback, and in their high density, they have a variable setback of 10 to 20 feet. The 10-foot setback typically applies to their attached single-family developments, but they do allow in some cases that through some type of reduced setback standard to go down to 10 for detached as well. Tigard is 20 feet for the medium density and 10 feet for the high density. Beaverton is 15 to 17 feet in their medium density. And again, it's not clear to me why they have the variable, the 15 to 17 feet. It's not based on any height or anything like that. It's not based on whether or not it's single detached or attached. I didn't have a chance to call and figure that out, but I'll go into Beaverton because I have an asterisk up there. And surprisingly, their high density, they actually have a 25-foot front yard setback because they encourage the apartments to be set back from the streets, whereas in a lot of jurisdictions they're requiring that the apartments actually come to the street, and then parking goes to the side or rear. Within Beaverton, they have it's kind of like a 3-tiered system that you can ask for reduced setbacks, and one is if you get the consent of the surrounding property owners. That's one version. Non-consent of the surrounding property owners, but it makes sense to whoever makes that decision. And then there's a third. Well, because I'm not sure. Like it seems somewhat subjective to me. And then there's the third one where you get partial consent of surrounding property owners. And then Newburgh, which is our closest neighbor, has their low density 15. Medium and high density can get down to 12 feet. So I'm just going to say from a staff's perspective, generally any planner that you ask is going to be in favor of flexible and variable standards simply because it affords the developer an opportunity to provide a variety of types of housing at different price points so that you're not limited. In this case, they could move the house up and get a bigger house and charge more for the house, or you could have, the result could be that you have a bigger backyard for people to enjoy because they're moving the structure forward. But at the end of the day, we have plenty of air and space that goes around our developments. They're not proposing to amend the side or rear, and it is a community decision on what it is that you would prefer to see in the community. The final thought I would leave you with is that if you do choose to allow the reduced setbacks, to make consideration for that provision that allows projections into the front yard setback. And my recommendation, after speaking with Chair Simpson earlier, would be that we consider any reduction, an asterisk within the dimensional table that says that if the house is built to 14 feet, then no projections beyond that 14 feet would be allowed other than the porch.
And just to clarify, because this architectural features allowed into the setback is in a different part of the code, you just go read a different section and it says you can do that. But after speaking with Brad, it kind of made sense if we put right below it in this little grid the thing. That way you're not looking in two different places to find it. So if that's where our discussion leads us, that's kind of where we went.
Right, and the strictest standard would apply. So we would leave that in there because we have other zones where they're not proposing to amend that front yard setback. So we could leave that language in 1652 alone.
Mm-hmm.
But for these reduced setbacks in these three zones, if that's the direction you decide to go, we should put a footnote in the table.
Can you clarify that again? So we have 5 residential zones, and only 3 are affected.
Page 44.
So,
So they've only proposed to amend the front yard setbacks for 3 zones. The
Yeah.
medium density residential low, the medium density residential high.
right. So we're eliminating the term or the usage of front yards. There will not be any identification as front yards in the 3 residential zones. Is that correct?
In those 3
Right.
residential zones,
So-
you would have a smaller
Yeah.
front yard.
So we're referring to setbacks as
Front porch,
front porches and
garage entrance, and
garage
front
entrances.
buildings.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
And can you give me a definition of our front porch? I know what a definition is, but I don't know what the city's or the applicant's definition of a front porch is.
Well, we look at it, if it's uncovered and doesn't have any structure associated with it, it's not a front porch, it's something with a roof over it is what we would consider a front porch. Because, I mean, if you counted like somebody's front deck that stepped out into their yard, even if it was uncovered, we wouldn't look at that as their porch, we would look at that as a landscape feature or something. Under 30 inches, it's not something that we really get involved with.
Okay, so we're looking at the initial front porch, because depending on the
We're looking
grade
at a covered
change.
front porch, and if you would like
Yeah.
to further
Yeah.
clarify that as you go through your deliberations and discussions, we can say covered front porches, or, front porches, any portion of the building that has a roof beyond that 14 feet.
Okay, and if there is a structure above the front porch?
Like the, like
a livable-
an alcove or
A
a deck
livable
or something.
space above the front porch? How do we deal with that?
If it's not part of the porch, then we would look at it as part of the primary structure, and that would then fall into that category of it's entirely up to you. I mean, we can still allow, like I said, you could still allow those architectural features to come out into the front yard setback for that 5 feet, but you're actually dropping then the front yard setback to 9 feet as opposed to the 10 feet.
I guess
So, John-
what I'm saying is,
Are you referring
Yeah, exactly.
to this picture right here?
like something like that, if there's a livable
Yeah,
unit
for example, here,
above-
would this be considered part of the structure?
We would not consider it that's kind of a funky porch. We would consider the front of that porch at 10 feet, that architectural feature above, we would not consider part of the porch.
It's where the
Even
house
though
starts.
it's not an architectural feature, it's actually a room.
The house starts there.
So is that, yeah.
That's where the house starts.
The house would start right.
That's 14, so that's front of the building, that'd be 14
14.
feet.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, I see. So they wouldn't be able to say 10 feet from that because it's the porch. It's actually the front of the building, so it'd still be 14.
Yeah, the
feet
main
from-
primary structure, any part of that
Okay.
primary structure would be set back at 14. any portion of the porch that doesn't include habitable space and covered would be 10, and then the face of the garage would be 20.
Did I answer your question, John?
Yes, it did. Thank
Yeah.
you. That picture was perfect.
And I should point out that you might see an architectural feature on the face of the garage, like on the top of the garage over the garage, but as long as it doesn't project beyond that 14 feet, we want to make sure that there's clear 20 feet for an automobile to park in front of the face of the garage, so we would have that clear height from the garage door back
Okay.
or forward.
So, if you look at like, let's see, picture on page 39 is a good one. On the setback, so we've got the street, then there's a grass strip and a sidewalk. Are we talking, is setback from the street or is setback from the inside of the sidewalk?
A setback in Sherwood is from the property line, so it's the back of the sidewalk.
Okay.
The lawn side of the sidewalk.
Correct. Sorry.
There.
So the planter strip or the planter strip is in the right of way.
Okay.
So it goes from the back.
So it would
of
be
the
their
side.
yard back from the edge, that front edge.
Correct.
Okay.
So from this
Yes.
right there.
Correct.
Okay.
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 Wait, can you point to, no, not the front of the, it's
Right
from
here.
the back of sidewalk, so.
Yeah,
the
it would
other
be,
side
it would be
of your-
right here.
Oh, okay, that's probably where you have your finger, but from over here, yes,
Right there.
Yes. Okay.
correct.
There we go.
Okay. Perfect.
I have two more questions. How the code gets implemented with this. Variances. How do variances impact this? Do we not have something within our code that allows you to adjust setbacks within a variance process?
We have three basic adjustments or variances, and the variance is the third one, and it's the most difficult one to obtain. You have to demonstrate that, it's a situation that's outside of the owner's control, which is hard to do when you're building a new structure, that it's something outside of your control. And so we don't run into that it's the minimum relief necessary. On setbacks, we don't run into that a lot. The other two are your Class A and Class B adjustments. The Class A adjustment would allow you let me make sure that I'm not getting those backwards, because for some reason I tend to. It's in 1684 of our code, and so what we have is we have a Class A variance, an adjustment, a Class A variance, and a Class B variance. So the adjustment allows a 10% increase in your front yard standard in the land use district. It's a fairly easy $50 application, fairly easy to meet. So on a 10-foot setback, they could project 1 foot. So it'd get down to that 9 feet, but it would never go into the 8 feet. The Class B variance is somewhat a little more difficult. It's not impossible. It's a little more expensive. I don't know off the top of my head how much it is, and it allows up to a 20% increase or reduction in the front yard setback. And then, of course, the variance is it doesn't give you it's anything over that 20%, and it would be the minimum relief necessary to alleviate your hardship.
Brad, I'm sorry. At least on some of those, I'm sorry. I think subdivisions are specifically exempt. I'm not sure which ones, though.
Okay, you guys can do that one, or get further information while the applicant's going. I just wanted to know if they would still be allowed variances and how much.
It's the variance. An applicant who proposes to vary a standard for lots yet to be created through a subdivision process may not utilize the Class A variance
Okay.
procedure. Is that what you were talking about?
So theoretically, when an application comes through, they would put in for a Class B at the same time they put in for a site plan.
Yeah, I mean, typically it's your single-family homeowner that's going to add to their house that ends up asking for those adjustments. We don't get a lot of new developments asking for the adjustments.
For Class A, right?
Oh, and Class A is,
Never.
Not when somebody's coming in with a new subdivision.
Okay.
You do get variances, like on some of our site plan reviews, as we did at the community center, and I suppose that there could be an instance where somebody in a subdivision might ask for a variance, but we wouldn't grant a variance to the front yard setback because it's clearly something that's within their control. They might
Okay.
have to reduce their number of lots or something, but they could still make the standard.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Go ahead.
right ahead.
I was going to ask if there were any more questions for staff before we called for applicant.
I do. Regarding section 16142.060, regarding the street trees, that is going to have to be make an adjustment as well, because we're strictly talking about front yards.
Specifically, like where typically our
under-
street trees are required within the planter strip.
I just want to, I mean, if someone's looking at this and it's referring to front yard setbacks, they're going to be confused with what is a front yard setback if they're dealing with the 3 residential zones that we're considering right now.
Because we no longer have front yard setbacks.
You still have a front yard setback. It's just a smaller front yard than what you might be used to.
We've changed the
But the
titles
word is
in
no
the
longer
code.
yard, front yard, so.
We've
it's-
changed the titles within the code. They're no longer front yard setbacks. They're now
Oh.
building setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can change it back to front yard setbacks if that's easy.
I just see where you're going. There's
Yeah.
probably tons of references within the code that are front yard setbacks.
Right, but the code doesn't say that. That particular part says. Does he say?
Now it'll say porch,
Yeah, no, it's
garage,
porch,
and
garage
building.
and building, yeah.
But we would, and it would be listed under the front yard standards in the setback table. So if you look at your.
So would you still be, would still be entitled front yard setbacks? It would just, within that would be front porch, garage entrance, and front building?
I believe what you want to refer to is Exhibit 3.
3?
Which is the proposed development code track changes format.
Mm-hmm.
Page 44.
Is that page 44?
Yeah.
It's just that front yard is stricken. It's got a red line through it, so it gives us the idea that it's going to be taken out.
I would actually, if we did that, then we should probably keep that front yard in because the front yard still applies to the other. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
So we would keep that front yard as a title,
Right.
and we'll just make that as part of the motion, and then we would further define front porch, garage entrance, in front of. We could even say primary structure, front of the primary structure, but it's all still under the front yard.
Right. So just so that we have, like you said, continuity within the code.
Sure.
We have front yard setback probably referred to in 100 different places.
Duly noted. I would just want to make sure that we make that as part of the motion so it's clear.
Good catch. Nice. All right, any more questions for staff before we proceed? All right, I will call Andy Tiemann as applicant. And if you would start with your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening. My name is Andy Tiemann. I'm a project manager for D.R. Horton. Address is 4380 Southwest Macadam Avenue, Suite 100, Portland, Oregon 97239. We are currently building a subdivision in the city of Sherwood. The subdivision name is Daybreak. And we went through the subdivision process and went through a hearings officer. And we knew that the front yard setback was at 20 feet. And so with discussions with staff, we inquired about variances or adjustments to setbacks. And we took this opportunity to look at doing a code amendment to apply to all zones. Really, over the years, it's been trending to be more pedestrian-oriented homes, which means they want the front door, they want the porch to be closer to the street. And so most of our architecture plans in Portland metropolitan area have what we would call porch-dominant homes, simply because the trend used to be, they call them snout houses, where it's garage-dominant in the front, and they're really not that attractive because majority of the home is garage door. And so, so a lot of our architecture has been trending to have a lot of the front doors and the porches to be in front of the garage doors, so you have a better street scene. So we looked into the code amendment, thought it was a good idea. We applied for that a couple months ago, and really what it's going to help out, in particular in the subdivision we're currently building on, is it's going to allow bigger square footage homes to be built. The rear yard will be the same rear yard. What it's basically allowing is the buildable area to be a little bit larger, so you get bigger square footage homes, higher price range homes, or the alternative is having to be able to have a bigger backyard. Being able to push that home a few feet further to the street would allow a bigger backyard, which customers would rather have. So with me tonight, I brought a PowerPoint, and we're proposing the setbacks 20 feet to the garage, 14 to the 14 to the home, and 10 feet to the porch. And those setbacks, like Brad mentioned, other cities, I checked Washington County, the city of Happy Valley, city of Hillsborough, they all have flexibilities in their front yard setbacks. They've moved toward further defining the front yard setback to covered porches and the front dwelling wall. This is a typical site plan. It's kind of hard to read the dimensions, but you can see 10 feet to the porch, 14 to the front, and then 20 feet to the garage. You can see on that site plan how porch dominant plans are these days. So here's a picture. I think you might have this in your packet already. I believe this is in Sherwood. This allows a porch and the living area to be closer to the street. Here's a good street scene of how that would look with still decent landscaping in the front yard. The next slide, that is a home that we build in Portland. You can see that the porch and the front room is closer to the road. Next slide is another home. You can see a nice big porch, still have a nice front yard, sidewalk and planter strip. And there's another rendering that it's porch dominant, trying to get that front door and living area in front so the garage door is not so dominant. So those are the plans that we build all over Portland. We would like to build that at Daybreak subdivision. And with this code amendment, it would actually allow us to build bigger homes, bigger square footage homes, and an alternative of having larger yards also. So that's my presentation. If you have any questions.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Do you deal, going back to street trees, City of Sherwood has a canopy spread requirement. Have you looked at that, and are you concerned that there might be some intrusion on the canopy into these areas where it's going to be closer to the street?
No, the street trees usually have a canopy of 30 feet. And so when the street trees are planted in the planter strip, you have a 5-foot sidewalk, plus you have a 10-foot to the porch. So that full canopy would still give you a couple feet before it touches the porch. So I do not have any concerns with the street trees.
Are most of your projects where you have a curb-tight sidewalk, or are they typically have all planter strips within these developments?
They do vary. Most of them will have a planter strip, especially with the low and medium density. When you get into a higher density, you'll start looking at, there's a trend for narrow streets, and specifically in the city of Portland, and trying to minimize development impacts to save trees and other topo-constrained areas. But there are other trees that have a smaller canopy that you can utilize that don't have 30-foot span. They'll have more columnar type street trees that could be implemented with that. So that could be used also when you have a curb tight sidewalk, and basically you're essentially putting your planter strip in your front yard. So your front yard will still be the same 10 feet, but you'll just have to choose a different type of tree species to meet that requirement.
So, you were looking at 10 feet, but when you encounter or include a 4-foot wide sidewalk with maybe some additional steps leading up to the porch, you're pretty much eliminating most of your front yard. So what do we? It's going to be very little lawn in those areas. Also, if you include whatever utilities might be in those areas, I think some of the homes probably won't see much lawn in that. Is that correct?
Yeah, the what I try to demonstrate in some of these pictures, if you can maybe go to the previous picture. That's probably that picture right there. You see the garage. The garage is 20 feet. That porch is probably coming forward, I don't know, about 6 or 8 feet. So that front yard is probably more like 12 feet. And usually the front door is close to the garage door. So that pathway is very short. So you have a larger area to have a bigger front yard. If you go to the previous picture, that's kind of hard to see. But you can see that most of the front doors are close to the garage door. So that walkway is pretty small. It's not impacting the full front yard. So with larger homes, you'll have larger space between garages that the appearance feels fine on a front yard. When you get into a higher density, it starts getting kind of small. But I think with the previous pictures where these homes, you still have a green area and decent landscaping in the higher density residential zones. But in the low and medium density, I don't think you notice that much because the walkways are so short.
So in this Daybreak development you're going to be building, are you looking at randomly putting these homes in different setbacks, or are they all going to pretty much be, when we look down the road, you're all going to use pretty much the same setbacks on all of them?
Yeah, we would like to utilize these setbacks on all the homes. Probably we have probably 8 different floor plans that we're building out there, and with each floor plan we have different elevations, so the porches would be different. So I don't think you'd see a consistent 10 feet on every single lot. It just gives us flexibility on being able to push these houses closer to the road, so that you could utilize living area and rear yards to maximize those areas. So I mean, I guess to consider on these setbacks, if you have it at 10 feet, that you could have potentially every house at 10 feet.
But there's still going to be the garage in between, so there'll still be variations, I think, because you'll have the porch at 10, the front door at 14, and the garage at 20. So there'll be articulation from the street,
Right.
unless they're rear loaded.
Yeah, and typically you'd want enough variation in your architecture plans that you're not going to have the same footprint over and over and over again, because the trend also is they want variety. Customers want variety in architecture, and there was, when you get to those snout houses, they look very similar over and over and over again. With flexibility with the front setbacks, you can have I think, like, for example, this picture shows the second-story living area being popped out. In another picture, it was like a single-story front room being popped out. So you could do a lot of, with those flexible setbacks, you could do a lot of variation with your architecture to get a really nice street scene.
So the picture you're showing right now with the living space above the porch, are you, from what we talked about, that is basically going to be 14 feet from the property line, that porch,
Correct.
the way it looks right now.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
So this happens to be porch and living area, so that would have to be set back
Yeah.
14 feet.
Any other questions?
Yeah, one question, just a clarification. I'm just trying to get an idea of where, I understand the architectural features and stuff. You made a comment that, they want more pedestrian-friendly setbacks. Who are they?
In particular, it'd be customers. I mean, it really started with Metro and wanting higher density developments. And over the years, flexibility with the setbacks, I guess when I made the statement I was more in general of the general public.
Thanks.
Mhm.
All right, so any other questions? All right, we've been asking a lot of questions, but you still have about 17 minutes left for rebuttals, so we're going to allow other people to testify. I have no other blue cards, so if we have anybody that would like to speak in favor of this application, then we have an opportunity for anybody that like to speak opposed to the application. All right, we have no one racing up to speak for or against this. I don't know if you would like to rebut all of the non-existent testimony. So at this time, seeing no one else coming forward, I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. And then we will have any final comments from staff and questions of staff once you're done. Yes.
I would just, Commissioner Clifford had asked about the curb-tight sidewalks. Sherwood generally prohibits, or, I mean, I guess it would be in an extreme case where they were trying to cross a wetland or something where it made sense to push it up, like we did on Edie for the Renaissance development. That would be curb-tight, but generally we ask for a planter strip in all of our cross-sections, unless it was approved as part of a planned unit development or an older development.
Yeah, we live in
that changed at one
We live
time.
in Woodhaven, and I'm on Ballard, and he's on the street
Mandel.
on Mandel, one over. None of those streets have planter strips.
And
It's all
that's what I'm
curb
saying.
cut.
So I mean, it has been an
Yeah.
evolution. There was a time, I would say that generally when you're, I'm not going to say that. I would just say that engineers like to have the curb tight sidewalks, and they'll
Right.
ask for that. But we have, as a community, adopted standards that generally require now the planter strips. So we get planter strips in our developments. The county may not always require the planter strip like us on Edie or Elwood, but
So,
if it's a collector and arterial, which all the county roads are in our area, they require the visual corridor. So we will get a planter strip of sorts.
okay. So I have quite a few notes about going forward on the deliberations. So I guess the first general question I would ask, going forward, are we looking towards trying to get together a recommendation so that we can pass it on to council as favorable, so that we can come up with some, I guess I was looking at some of the things that we've already discussed in crafting language to address a couple of the things that we found, including a couple of my concern are the attached versus detached. If we move it to 14 feet on high density residential, does that for all single family and apartments? How does that incorporate? I have a concern on that.
I guess our code doesn't differentiate because it speaks to lot sizes when you talk about differentiating between product types.
Okay.
But as far as the front yards, we don't. And so I suppose that if that's something that concerns you, I'll take whatever recommendation you want to the city
Well,
council.
I guess my personal observation is I live in a snout house, one of those ones where the garage is in the front, and I was talking to friends of ours and people living in different communities, and we're kind of all in agreement that we like having the eyes of the neighborhood out where people can see them, meaning the windows and our front doors out where it feels like a small community, where everybody is, you don't have, the anarchist skateboarders that we apparently have in Sherwood out there because we've got our windows open, we've got our doors there, everybody can see what's going on in their community, and the general feel of what they're proposing invites the community and the neighborhood to be more involved at the street with your house instead of having what we have right now, which is 20 foot and you can have a wall of garage and house right there. By stepping it back, the garage doesn't become the prominent feature. I think we could get a better product. So that's just my opinion.
No, I agree, because I actually did a report in college with houses built in the 1920s and 30s, the craftsman style, the bungalows, and many of those had front porches with the garages set back or being entered, detached. So I love that style. I love front porches. But my concern is that the fact that they're just so close to the street side that we're really losing the beauty of the landscape in those areas. You're just going to see row after row of houses.
Yeah, and I think that there's a difference between the architectural design, like our houses all have garage out here and porch back here versus, the other way. And so I think that is different than the setback. If you had I guess I'm just thinking if you have, if the code changes for everything, if you have an existing community and you've got these houses with 20-foot setbacks, and now all of a sudden you've got these houses with them with 10-foot setbacks.
We do have various setbacks throughout the community, though. But primarily they are approved through planned unit developments. And Woodhaven is a perfect case for that. We have variable setbacks throughout Woodhaven.
But there's a lot of exceptions in Woodhaven. There's street widths and there's a whole bunch of other.
It's turned out to be a nice development in my mind.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a great development, unless you have to get a fire engine through it. But other than that, it's a great development.
So
I love living there. I like it.
Yeah.
So the front building being set back 14 feet doesn't bother you as much as having a front porch at 10 feet. Is that?
Yeah, I just think that's just too close because, there's not a lot you can do. Once you get the sidewalk in, sometimes you end up with a big utility vault sitting right up above next to your driveway. You're just losing any opportunity for the homeowner to do anything with their front yard.
I agree. I'm for changing. I support changing it. I just don't know if I support going as far down as 10 feet.
That's where I'm at too.
I
It's
agree.
10 feet concerns because of the look of Sherwood. It'd be nice to have more public comment to kind of see what the community really wants.
Well, I don't think we should touch the 20 foot. I think that should stay.
Right.
I think if
Absolutely.
the front of the building and or porch was somewhere between 12 and 14 feet, that would probably be okay. But I wouldn't want to see anything closer than 12 feet. Because I think if we were more urban, this might be appropriate. But we're not.
We're really
That's
suburban.
kind of
We're
what I'm
halfway to the
looking at,
coast as
is
far
the-
as people
yeah.
in Portland are concerned. So we're not urban yet.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
kind of what I have to agree. I think we don't necessarily fit the urban metro cookie cutter that we hear about so much. I think we're a little bit different.
And I think the community really does not want metro influence,
Yeah,
and that's what's kind of
14 feet still not very far.
Well, it's not, but I think in some cases, where it's a PUD, like those houses near Target, for example, but I think that's a very specific niche, and that's a
Yeah.
specific
Those
need.
are
and-
like 10 feet though. I
Yeah.
guess.
Right,
Well,
yeah, and I think.
but it's an organized
this is a
area.
This is a neighborhood that's going to be kind of out in open space, so it seems like we could give it a little more room to breathe.
I don't want to take all ability to have some kind of a variance. I have some exceptions, and I need to have 10 feet on this port or whatever, but I don't know that I feel comfortable changing the code for every project going forward to say you can have a 10-foot setback.
So with a 14-foot
1420.
building setback and a 20-foot garage setback, the variance on a building would be 20% or another 2.8 feet. So then you're pushing that 10, 11 foot envelope. So that gives you if someone wants a variance opportunity.
Yeah.
It also, I think the side benefit of this is going to encourage people to build community neighborhood friendly by allowing them to build the building, the front door out further and put the garages back, and we're going to be encouraging that type of development.
And I like that. I like
I
that.
do too.
Yeah.
But I just think maybe 10 feet is a little too close.
But like she said, I mean, if we do keep the 20 and do 20 and then the 14 and then there's the variance, they can get to about 12 or so.
11.2.
12 point something.
1.2.
Yeah.
7.2, yeah.
So how does that impact the architectural
Features,
features?
right? Things that stick out.
So that's the next part of the discussion. So if we have just two setbacks, there's the garage setback and the building, inclusive of the front porch,
Covered front porch.
covered, yeah,
Right.
any
Yeah.
part of the building. So someone wants to put an uncovered deck that can encroach into the front yard.
If it's
Below
below
30
30 inches,
feet, 30 inches.
that doesn't, I mean, somebody could theoretically, I suppose, as long as we don't have maximum lot coverage standards in Sherwood. So theoretically, if somebody wanted to make their whole front yard a low-lying wood deck, they could do that.
Yeah, because I think there's one in my neighborhood that's a low deck out front that it's just got, and I'm sure some architect has the correct word, it has just a couple of stringers going across the top of it.
And once they cover it, then
But
it
it-
becomes a porch.
At what level is covered versus just a couple of stringers running across?
Do you want to file a complaint on that?
No,
property?
I do not. I think it looks beautiful, but I'm just saying.
I think it was a
when does
compliment.
I would
when does
generally
it-
think that we would consider that a structure once.
Oh,
you get
is it because it
above the
looks
30
great?
inches.
So,
It could be.
So what-
It could be
So I-
in there prior to the setback standards. I don't know, unless you want to file a complaint. I can't.
no, I am not planning a complaint. I'm just saying it looks great, and so I don't want to prevent people from doing something.
Right. I did want to speak just quickly. If you did the 14 feet and you allow the architectural features to project, then porches and covered canopies and those things are included within that language, and you would be looking at then potential of going to the 9 feet. So my recommendation is if it is your intent to make a recommendation to council that you want to see that 14 foot and nothing beyond that, that you add that footnote to the table that says not including the architectural features of 16.52.050. And then I just wanted to speak real quick to Mr. Carey's concerns about public outreach. We ourselves were also upset that we
I know.
didn't hear more
I
from the
believe we
public.
tried.
We put, there was an article in the Gazette, an article in the Archer, which is the newsletter that everybody gets or has access to. It's been on the website. We have not heard hide nor hair from anyone.
And it's frustrating.
It is frustrating.
I would
It's not-
be-
It's not surprising. I mean,
No, but
It's one of those things where
This could change the entire community if we
Well,
make a decision in a
right.
vacuum.
Mhm.
If someone out there hates it
Yeah.
or loves it, we have no idea.
And that's a good point.
So we're kinda
What-
shooting-
What we have is then what we say, it's 10 feet, they start building these. That's when you start hearing from the public coming and screaming about having 10 feet, having houses too close to the street.
I take solace
It's
in the
tough.
fact of knowing that you do have that product already in Sherwood, and it doesn't sound like we get a lot, we don't get a lot of complaints since I've been here for 2 years.
But is it in pockets as opposed to entire?
It is, but I mean, if you think of Sherwood as a community as a whole, I mean, there's variation in your housing stock, and so you can look at it, you can choose to look at it neighborhood by neighborhood, but there was a conscientious decision to not allow subdivisions to put in monument signs, and I suspect that the reason for that was that you wanted it to be one community as opposed to individual neighborhoods. We do have individual neighborhoods that predated that, and not that they, I guess, feel any different from the rest of the community, but it does give a sense that the community is a whole, as opposed to separating out these little pockets of development. So
So,
And I wanted to, the clarification, it wasn't 16.52050, it's 16.50.050.
505
For the
says,
accessory architectural features.
says architectural features such as cornices, eaves, canopies, sunshades, gutters, signs, chimneys, and flues may project up to 5 feet into front or rear required yard setback and 2.5 feet into the required side yard setback. And your recommendation is that we put an asterisk in our table that
It would become a
addresses
numbered
that.
footnote
a
within our
numbered
dimensional
footnote
table.
that says that these reduced setbacks in MDRL, MDRH, and HDR would not be
Subject to that,
subject to architectural feature encroachment.
correct.
so,
So then they can't go into them.
Right.
yeah.
So that maintains the 14.
And is that the number we want? Are we?
I like 14, that's my opinion.
I feel more comfortable with that. How many acres of undeveloped property are we talking about in Sherwood? Of
Well,
That's a loaded question. I mean, we have vacant land, we have land that could be redeveloped.
right.
But it doesn't, I mean, you have to look out as land is annexed. I mean, this would
Right.
be applied to any land that's added to the city, Brookman area, anything as, right now, there's not a lot of land where it would apply to in the city of Sherwood.
Currently, but we could be looking
But in the
at.
future, it certainly could.
Right.
And I do want to stress that it is, and Commissioner Simpson made this too, it is not across all of our residential zones. So in our lower density residential zones, you still maintain that 20-foot setback.
Right.
This applies to the medium density residential low, medium density residential high, and the high density residential zones,
Yeah.
which for all intents and purposes are our medium and high density residential zones with the, relatively smaller lots.
So with what we're talking about is also with the architectural design facade of a house. We need to clarify if a house does not have a covered porch. We need to make a clarification of what is a porch, because if there are some architectural designs that don't really include, it may have a stoop and maybe a little overhang, that just keeps the elements from the front door. Is that considered a front porch?
I would say that if you take out the 10-foot for a porch, that we look at any portion of that structure at 14 feet from the foundation up. And we don't allow, I suppose somebody could say, well, I'm going to set my foundation back a foot, but we're going to look at the closest, the point of where that structure begins anywhere up that face. And I guess you should consider that generally eaves will project out 1.5 to 2 feet on average. So if we take out that, then that's the eaves start at 14 feet, and then the structure might start at 16, or they might have a smaller eave or no eave on the front.
Yeah.
Yeah, it affects houses with hip roofs, which we don't see a lot of those homes.
So be clear on that again. So you're saying, like, for example, the house that's viewed there, if that has a 1.5 eave, then the 14-foot would start at the eave, not at the face of the building?
Generally, any portion of the building that's within that
Right.
setback is what we look at. If you take out the architectural feature portion.
Okay.
Understood.
Yep.
That,
Yeah.
so that almost gains you 1.5 feet.
That puts us at 15 feet.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'm hearing is you're going to keep the title front yard setback in here so that the code reflects that. I'm just going to go over kind of the changes that we've got through already. And we're going to eliminate the front porch and just have two designations, a garage setback and a front building setback. And there'll be two setbacks, and right now we are looking at 14 feet as a recommendation that we're going to go forward with a numbered footnote that said that 1650.050 is not allowed on the reduced setback zones. So is that where we all are on that? And the variances and I don't see any other changes that I had noted that were brought up that have not already been addressed or concerns. All right,
I feel comfortable.
all right. Do we have a motion then?
I move the Sherwood Planning Commission approve the application for.
We have to make a recommended.
Oh, this is a recommendation one. Okay. Nope, that's fine. I was not. Let's see.
We can
It'll be good.
Number two, yes.
We can
I
recommend.
move the Sherwood Planning Commission forward a recommendation of approval to the City Council for front yard setback amendment PA 13-05 based on the applicant testimony, public testimony received, the analysis, findings, and conditions in the staff report with the following modifications. We keep the title of front yard setbacks. We remove front porch, and then we leave garage
And front building.
and front building with garage set at 20 feet across the board and with front porch set at 20 feet
Front,
for,
no.
14 feet
front
for
of
the
the building,
medium
It's front building.
front building, front building set at 14 for medium high, and high residential with 20 feet for the previous,
With an annotation.
with an annotation in that states
1650-050.
1650-050
Does not apply.
does not apply. Yes? Does that sound right?
It does, It does, but I heard a 20 feet in there for the structure, and so it was
So 20 feet for all of the
garage.
garage setback, and then 20 feet for low,
Very low.
for very low,
Very low PUD.
very low
So they're not
PUD.
changing those at all.
So no change to those, just changing the medium high, and high from 20 to 14.
Okay.
Anybody want to second that?
I'll second.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion? All right. All those in favor of recommending approval of PA 1305, say aye.
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 Opposed? So moved. All right. Thank you very much. And that's it.
Commissioner announcements or anything?
We have commissioner announcements. Planning commissioner announcements. TSP tomorrow night, if anybody wants to run for that. All right, then if
You know what,
there's
you forget anything.
no objection, then we will close the hearing.
Adjourned.
We are adjourned. Sorry,
Okay.
we are adjourned.
I get home before my bedtime this time.